The federal corruption case against JEA's two former highest-ranking executives enters its third week after days of scorching testimony. I'm joined now by David Bauerlein, Metro columnist at the Florida Times-Union, and a reporter who began covering the JEA scandal long before federal prosecutors filed charges. David, welcome.
Good to be here, Ann.
Good to have you. So last week was about as exciting as it gets for a white-collar criminal case. What are some of your big takeaways?
Yeah, it was a lot of action-packed testimony as white-collar criminal trials go. You're absolutely right, Ann. So the big takeaways were the testimony from former general counsel Jason Gabriel, who was, as the city's top lawyer, going back and forth with Aaron Zahn back in 2019 about whether this ill-fated incentive plan, which is the heart of the prosecution, was actually legal or not. And so Jason Gabriel recounted some expletive-laden meetings, some anger, as he described it, on the part of Aaron Zahn, the former CEO, that the plan was not legal, that could not be implemented. And Jason Gabriel also often characterized himself as, quote, duped and deceived, unquote, which I think is something that will probably show up both literally and thematically in the state's closing arguments in this case. His oral argument has been there was a very public plan and there was a very secret plan, and that the secret plan was being kept under wraps as much as possible, and eventually was smoked out by various groups looking into it, including whether it was actually legal or not. So I thought his testimony was really going to be strong towards the state's characterization of the case. And then, of course, there was the witness who did not remember anything, essentially, or in the case of former JEA board member Camille Lee Johnson, pleaded the Fifth Amendment against her right against self-incrimination. And that was kind of an interesting case because she was at the crossroads of so much of this back in 2019.
So she was not just a board member. She actually chaired the compensation committee for JEA. So she was the one that theoretically would have known the content of this planned, this benefit plan.
Right, exactly. That's precisely why she would have been right there, not only was one of the board members who voted to seek offers for JEA, but as chairwoman of the compensation committee, was there sort of vetting this plan as it was evolving. Now, the actual plan that was presented to the JEA board at its July 2019 meeting was not the plan that the compensation committee had seen before then. So obviously the prosecutors wanted to know, what did she know about the plan? What conversations did she have with Aaron Zahn or former Chief Financial Officer Ryan Wanamaker, who's also on trial? And that was where they got just repeatedly her invoking the Fifth Amendment.
She invoked the Fifth a number of times. She also said she couldn't recall the name of JEA's attorney. She wouldn't say what being compensation committee chair entailed, and she said she didn't remember what a performance unit was. How plausible does a jury find that? I mean, granted, 2019 was a while ago, but this was a highly publicized case. It was reported on, extensively by your paper and other outlets. It was the subject of a grand jury investigation. These people have been asked to testify before the City Council Investigatory Committee. Is there any question as to whether, these memories are failing or just not being shared?
Yes, obviously there would be question about that. I mean, this was a historic episode for JEA, for the city. It was highly reported, headlines all over the place. Now, the jury will not hear this, evidently, because she testified it on Friday outside the jury. It does not appear that she's going to be called as one of the state's witnesses. Her argument in a motion she filed with the court last week is that she was on JEA after she left JEA. The pandemic was there. She's in the restaurant business. She was really neck deep in trying to save her restaurants, and she, quote, quickly forgot what happened to JEA. And this is something where even a year after 2019, when she was interviewed by the FBI, the U.S. Attorney, state attorneys, investigators, they did the 6-page report that basically said she could not remember a lot of substantive stuff that they were asking her about. So, is it plausible that somebody would sort of have this kind of memory wipe after leaving JEA? That's her argument at the very least. Would it be compelling to a jury? that's a question we're not going to find out because she's not going to be called as a witness. It doesn't appear.
She's not the only one who's had a kind of failed memory. I mean, former City Council President Kevin Hyde also was called to testify. He was an advisor on the sale, repeatedly said, I don't recall. And, he was weeds deep in this case.
He was. And so now Kevin did not plead the Fifth Amendment. He did not. And, it's possible people do not recall things. There was a lot going on, the whole drinking water from a fire hose analogy. But yeah, when you have those sort of I don't remember, it does sort of raise questions about, well, why not? I mean, you were there right at the crossroads, right there on the front lines of all these deliberations. So certainly the kind of witness that you would most want to hear from in these type of cases, especially because, again, the whole case from the prosecution is that there was this very public presentation and there was this very secret presentation, and they're trying to show over and over again what people knew in public and then what they had no idea was happening sort of beneath the surface of these public deliberations.
Yeah, and so a key witness on the behind-the-scenes element was Stephen Amdur. He's the former roommate of Aaron Zahn, the former CEO of JEA, and he took the stand to testify about a conversation that he had with Aaron Zahn. He was being called in possibly to be, consulting on some of this stuff with his company. He's a lawyer. And he says that Aaron Zahn told him something really significant. What kind of testimony did he bring, and how significant was that for the jury?
Well, I think it was significant for the jury. So Stephen Amdur essentially testified that several months before this all kind of emerged as JEA potentially being for sale, that Aaron Zahn had told him that he had the support from the mayor to get about $40 million off the sale, eventually to benefit personally from the sale. Now, Mayor Curry has emphatically denied that conversation ever took place, but the significance for the jury would be that...
Well, to be clear, he didn't deny the conversation took place between Amdur and Zahn. He has said he never was aware. He said that didn't happen, I think is the phrase he's used repeatedly. That did not happen.
Exactly. Yes. Thanks for clarifying that, Ann. Yeah, Mayor Curry has said he never told Aaron Zahn that it's okay with me if you make $40 million off the sale of JEA. But the significance of that would be for the jury that obviously the question throughout has been, was the state's case has been that Aaron Zahn was sort of guiding JEA, driving JEA towards this posture of let's go seek bids, let's put JEA up for sale, and that simultaneous with that, he was pushing forward this incentive plan that would have enriched him and other JEA employees, but certainly himself in the state's case, with this massive financial windfall that is just unheard of in the sale of a government asset, that you would have that kind of personal gain being involved in the picture in any way.
And Amdur also testified that Zahn told him that the mayor was also okay with his senior leadership team at JEA making many millions of dollars themselves as well. How important is it that Amdur is a former close buddy of Aaron Zahn? I mean, they were roommates.
Yeah, they were roommates when they were both going to school at Yale University as undergraduates. It would sort of perhaps lend to the credibility of the statement from the standpoint that they knew each other, and that there was something where Aaron Zahn would have felt comfortable making that kind of statement. He wasn't just any lawyer; it was somebody he had a friendship with and knew about. And Pillsbury, the firm that Stephen Amdur works for, did eventually become one of the law firms that was hired by JEA to provide legal guidance as they were navigating the potential sale of the utility.
So this is a case that has no cameras in the courtroom. It's federal court. A lot of us are relying on the reporting that you are doing and the other reporters in the courtroom. What are you expecting this week? How close are we getting to the end of the government's case?
Very close. So assuming things go as scheduled, the government will have 2 witnesses that they'll still call to the stand, former Chief Administrative Officer Herschel Vineyard and former Human Resources Vice President John Kendrick. And then they would rest their case. The defense then has talked about putting on an expert witness who's going to kind of deconstruct the notorious incentive plan and kind of show that maybe it wasn't as lucrative as it's being portrayed. There's also a possibility that there will be some statements presented to the jury that Aaron Zahn made back in January 2020 that Ryan Wanamaker believes are helpful to his case. And so it's kind of a weird trial where you have two juries, and there's possibility that one of the juries that's hearing the evidence is Aaron Zahn would leave the courtroom so that the jury that's deciding the guilt or innocence of Ryan Wanamaker would stay. It's kind of an interesting type of novel situation from that standpoint. But, we could have, depending on how many witnesses the defense has, we could be getting into closing arguments this week.
Well, you can read David Bauerlein in the Florida Times-Union. David, thank you so much for your reporting.
Thank you very much.